From the center of the galaxy, this is ForceCenter, a show about Star Wars, pop culture, and the ultimate adventure, life itself. I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
I'm Ken Napzok. Had a lot of life adventures this week, so I think I'm back in the Star Wars saddle. I'm here. We're here.
Star Wars, yes, has been walking with me through all of my various adventures this week, but we are happy to be here for a news episode, breaking news from a long time ago. Lesyle Headland stormed the internet with lots of interesting and insightful comments, thoughts, observations, discussions about the Acolyte. So we've collected up some of those, and we've got a great question from one of our patrons on Patreon, a classic topic that we haven't revisited recently that feels very relevant about Padme's political career and the dangers to it. So we look forward to discussing both the old and new here on Breaking News from a long time ago. As always, we want to let you know that today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. You can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, MP3 player, or your Pip Droid, if you have one. We are continuing to recommend The Light of the Jedi, the first book in the High Republic series. It's by Charles Soule. And if the Acolyte is getting you interested in the entire era of the High Republic, this is a great place to kick it off. It is one of our favorites here on ForceCenter, and it helps us a lot if you download an audiobook. So you can download that free audiobook today by going to audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. One more time, that's audibletrial.com/ForceCenter for your free audiobook. Any Light of the Jedi thoughts, Ken?
It's on my list to think about rereading, along with Leia, Princess of Alderaan, Rebel Rising, a lot of those books where I'm like, I'd love to reread that. Life won't allow me to, but in my head, I'm reading it.
I'm fighting to make time for the second phase of High Republic. I'm about halfway through. I'm reading Kevin Scott's Path of Vengeance. I'm enjoying it, but I got a lot on my plate. So every time I crack open the book, there's little guilt gremlins going. Should you be reading right now? Should you be reading right now? So I'm fighting the guilt gremlins.
Guilt gremlins is a great villain. I'm halfway through Living Force, right? So I was like, I've been halfway through it for about 2 months. So I started yesterday, landed down from Seattle to talk about. I pulled over. I read about 2 chapters of Living Force and fell asleep with the book on my face. So there you go.
Yeah, it's hard. Maybe you could listen to an audiobook, and Ken, if you get one through audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Anyway, move on to our asks. We've been doing this push to try to reach 10,000 subscribers. How's it going, Ken?
It actually is going great. Will we make it? I don't know. I'm choosing hope. We have a couple weeks left. You can help us reach that goal of 10,000 subscriptions to our YouTube channel, subs as they call them. We are a little over, about 9,250-ish, I think. I forgot to do my check right before here. But growing, and we appreciate you all being here. A lot of new folks checking in. Go back, check our archives, both on YouTube and on the podcast side. Support us, get into the Discord, all that kind of good stuff. But you can help us reach that goal of 10,000 subs by the time the Acolyte wraps by subscribing. We also want to let you know this week at the time of this episode, you might be listening 2 years from now, and it's not this weekend, but on Friday, July 12th at 2 p.m. Pacific, that is the time we choose to kind of, compensate for all time zones of the world, all of the Lord's time zones. We are doing a live stream Friday, July 12th, 2 p.m. Pacific, kind of looking ahead to the final episode of The Acolyte, taking your questions, taking your calls. If you're a Patreon supporter, going to be a lot of fun. So join us for that and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss it.
Yeah, I think everybody is anticipating a flashback episode for the Acolyte, where I think some pieces will finally fall into place, and I think there'll be many passionate opinions about what the Jedi did, what the witches did or didn't do. So I look forward to being able to discuss all that on the live stream, which is just always fun. Even if we're talking about heavy things, it's a Friday party. And then I usually get pizza afterward, like I'm 8 years old. So I look forward to my personal Star Wars pizza party after the live stream. And thank you, everybody who is subscribed. We're at 9,267. So again, a big jump from last week. So we only have about 700 to go in a week or half or so. So I think we can do it. Anyway, moving on to life adventures. Ken, you had a lot of life adventures. You were traveling. What else found you, and how'd your travels go?
It went great. On Saturday, I had pizza for breakfast and a donut for lunch. True story.
Perfect.
So it was, woke up, the town we stay in when Mark Ellis and I travel up to Seattle for shows is about 30 minutes north, really quaint small town. They have a farmer's market every Saturday during the summer. And so we woke up kind of early and I was like, oh, I'm going to get a coffee. Maybe I'll get a breakfast sandwich. No, I went straight for the pizza truck that shows up there, the wood fire pizza. It was great. Had a good time, good set of shows. I want to shout out ForceCenter listener Cameron, who showed on up to one of the shows on Friday night. And Joseph, this was great. We're just chatting. And, you kind of do not necessarily how long you've been listening, but, what's your listening journey with us. And his began with Other Center.
Oh, wow.
Discovered us through Other Center and then was like, oh, this is great. Oh, it's actually a Star Wars podcast. The branding says Star Wars. I'm a Star Wars fan. I'll wait for them to come back too. So Other Center brought in a Star Wars listener to us. So Cameron, thanks for coming out to the show. A lot of fun.
Yeah.
Good time. Wore my Star Wars hat out in public, which I don't do as much anymore. And it definitely started some conversations that, are good and some are good and some are bad and some are just people celebrating Star Wars in their own way, and seeing your hat is a beacon of, the beacons of Gondor are lit, and they can come talk to you directly. So anyways, good time, relaxing. I'm not going to brag, Joseph, but on one day, I did have 2 naps in one day.
You should brag. That should be a goal for all of us these days. Life is exhausting, and we should let ourselves sleep a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm saying the advice that I should take myself. I did take a nap, though. My wife and I were watching a film last night, and I was like, I'm getting tired. And she's like, do you want to take a mid-film nap? And I'm like, I do. I really do. Wow. And I did, and it was great. It was great adventures. And yeah, I've been wearing my Jedi t-shirt a lot. We've all been having lots of conversations about, Jedi philosophy, Jedi mistakes, how to own them, the criticisms of them. All that stuff that Acolyte is bringing up and discussing in a great way. And every time I go somewhere with my Jedi shirt, I'm like, am I going to just be stopped on Hollywood Boulevard and have a Jedi discussion? But not yet. Maybe one of these days. I've mostly just been nose down working this week, working on trying to produce this feature film, working on getting ready for the big birthday show that I'm doing in August. Ken is joining me there as well. The really fun adventure I had, which is kind of Star Wars adjacent, is I went to a screening of Jaws at the Egyptian Theater, which Netflix now runs, and is also there's also a bunch of programming by a great organization called American Cinematique, which runs events at 3 different theaters in Los Angeles, and great programming, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I'm sure it's happened other 4th of Julys, but it was like Die Hard has become the Christmas movie. Like Jaws obviously happens around 4th of July. There are famous quotes about it from 4th of July. It's always been a 4th of July film, but there were like 8 different theaters showing different screenings of Jaws. And it was like this particular year across the country, but also specifically in Los Angeles, it was like truly secular holiday where people were posting, well, I saw my screening. Same way people post on a holiday about, well, I gathered with my relatives, I went back home to this state and I had this traditional meal. They're like, well, I had my viewing of Jaws at this theater on this day. So it was this great sense of community across, the nation in Los Angeles that there's some shaky things about celebrating America. Instead, let's celebrate Jaws is what it felt like to me. And the screening was just great. It was sold out. They had hired, or I think, no, it was just one of the staff was dressed as a shark doing photo ops before and after the film. Amazing. Not like organized, just running around and you could grab the shark and go, can I take a selfie? And the shark would be like, yeah,
sure.
But it was great to see Jaws in the theater. And it was great to feel the different way that people reacted to it. Hundreds of people applauding when, spoiler, the shark doesn't win. Ultimately, laughing at things, the John Williams music. It just made me reflect a lot about, we talk often about, how Star Wars changed the industry, but how much Jaws paved the way for Star Wars because it was the first blockbuster. It was the first film that, like, on its surface, it's a B movie. It's a shark attack movie. It's a monster movie. It's a disaster movie. But it has such depth while also being really audience pleasing, both audience pleasing and sort of like theoretical, thematic analysis inviting.
Right.
That it has become not only that blockbuster in 1975 that changed the way films are made, but also I think paved the way for a lot of what we do and a lot of the way media is absorbed, because it's insanely popular. It's a feel-good movie. You could, I think, because people go through a hard time and the hard time is resolved and, balance is restored. People applaud when the villain loses. But there's so much to it to be analyzed and examined for years and years and years that it really got me thinking about all of its relationships to Star Wars.
I absolutely think it's right. You're right about paving the way. I've never seen all of it, and it's so funny you mentioned this, because this week, more than any other year, I had a couple friends go, "Hey, you getting in your Jaws viewing?" No, I've never. No, I grew up near the beach. I grew up with actual shark attacks happening a lot in Pismo Beach. I didn't watch this movie as a kid. Too real, too real. But in film school in the mid-'90s, this is absolutely a film that was studied for all the reasons you're saying and more. And that's where I saw a lot of it and talked about it. And it's one of those things that is it's great. It's great for a reason, right? It is. It's as recognized as it needs to be for all the right reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so fascinating and such just a positive communal experience. The theatrical movie going experience has been, tortured of late with strong opinions about movies and movies going to streaming very quickly and, theaters not recovering well from the pandemic and on and on and on. It was kind of fun to have that summer blockbuster feeling by seeing the original summer blockbuster of just a huge crowd of people having fun with a thoughtful, engaging film. Was like, God, this is great.
Love it. Love it. Well done. Good holiday.
All right. Sorry about the brief detour into Jaws Center. We will get back to Star Wars as we dive into the news. Like we discussed at the top, there was a storm of interviews from Acolyte creator, showrunner, writer-director Lesyle Headland. Ken, before we dig in, I just want to talk about this modern practice of writers, directors, showrunners giving lots of interviews either during or immediately after the audience watches a film or a television show or an episode of television show. Just to set the stage, I kind of just want to purge my own yelling at a cloud, because the industry has changed and this is commonplace practice. It's been going on for a while, starting with like HBO shows, everything from Game of Thrones to Succession, where, at the end of the episode, you get the creators come on and say, hey, here's what the episode meant. Was it ambiguous what Tyrion thought? Here's what we meant. Then down to, in Star Wars, Rian Johnson spoke very quickly after Last Jedi. The co-writer of Rise of Skywalker, Chris Terrio, spoke very quickly after it. It's become commonplace to do this. And sometimes I wrestle with it. So I wanted to get your thoughts on accepting this reality that that's the way it is these days.
Wow, you've opened it up right from the start to maybe be. Yes, we could probably do an entire episode on this. I'll say I think I'm with you, and I think I'm in the same spot, and a lot of it's changed. I love hearing creators talk about this stuff. I sometimes make a lunch, pull down one of the Star Wars archive books from Paul S. Duncan, and just read Lucas's words, some from back then, some from now, about what he meant and what it was about, and I enjoy that, and I enjoy a lot of the interviews you're talking about, and I enjoy a lot of the answers. And then sometimes this is all I blame podcasting for a lot of this. I blame the movie punching world. It's our fault.
Yeah.
We turned it all into sports talk years ago, as my friend Nick Mundy warned me back when I was producing the show Screen Junkies. And therefore, it turns the appreciation and understanding of art into a game to be won. And sometimes you feel like you need those answers. And there has been times, and I think you and I even talked off air about this, where sometimes I feel like I want the creator to come in and go, here's what it is. So maybe I can get a ding on the scoreboard. See, I told you that's what that scene means. And that's fine and dandy, but as time has gone on, as I've said a few times recently, we're in our 10th broadcast year, a decade. That's a whole decade. I've grown not tired of the creators, because we're going to talk about Lesyle Headland here, and I love everything she says about Star Wars. I've said that many, many times, going back to 2020 when she first came on the Star Wars scene. There's a little bit of I don't. It's not going to stop. I know it's not going to stop. Like you said, this is where we're at. Personally, I have reached the point I did reach as a sports fan about 10 or 15 years ago. I don't want your pregame talk. I don't need the postgame interview. Just want to watch the game and talk about how the game affects me. And that's kind of where I'm at. This is a news show. We're going to dive in. It's not me. I'm not even approaching anything we're talking about today with cynicism. It's what we do. We talk about it. But overall, I'm with you. I've changed. 4 or 5 years ago, I'd have been like, no, Joseph, I love when Rian Johnson comes out and says on opening weekend, this is it. Or now I appreciate J.J. Abrams a little more going, yeah, I made Rise of Skywalker. You like it? You don't? Cool. See you. Bye. I don't follow anyone on Twitter. Bye.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what I just wanted to be honest about, because I have absolutely no criticism of Leslie Headland or her great thoughts that I'm going to have fun talking about. She's doing her job, and this is part of the job these days. So this isn't about her or any of these quotes. It's about me trying to be honest that this is the way the industry does it, and I wrestle with it. There are many famous David Lynch quotes about not wanting to talk about his work, but the one that really speaks to me is he says, as soon as you finish a film, everybody wants you to talk about it. And for me, the film is the talking. And what he means by that is, like, if I could just write out a piece of paper, here are the ideas, here's the things I care about, I just give you that piece of paper. I make a film because there's something elusive and human that there aren't words for, but I can communicate what I feel in my soul by combining sound and images in this way. And I can convey something that words can't, by making this piece of art that speaks to you on a different level, a subliminal level, a subjective level. And I think for me, like that's what I want art to be. That's what I want a procedural to be.
Yeah.
I'd be happy if an episode of CSI is like, well, you figure it out. So the sports thing, I think, gets to the heart of it to me, because I think I love it when art is a conversation. I love it when, the creator makes a statement with their art, and then the audience responds. And sometimes maybe even the audience misinterprets what the artist said, which isn't great. But they, the audience brings all of their own perspectives, their own baggage, their own life experiences, and everybody can kind of experience the exact same static piece of art in a different way because we bring ourselves to it. And I think this new business model of creators going out right away risks turning it into a quiz of there's a right answer, and the artist will give it to us very quickly. And I think your scoreboard analogy is even better, because I think that's the greatest trap of, if people are having fun and saying, this scene means this to me, and it means this to this other person, because we're bringing something of ourselves to it. I don't want that reduced to there is a correct answer and you're going to find it out within 24 hours, because I think it cuts off some of the conversation, some of the dreaming, some of the wondering, some of the conversation of art.
Yeah, look, and I can go all over the place with it too. Where, like, I love talking about the meanings of songs. In fact, I'm the annoying guy who's like, "Oh, that Mighty Mighty Boston song?" The impression that I get, that's actually a mid-'90s song about the fear of HIV and a friend of his going through a test for AIDS, and he didn't. It's not a happy dance song. And I've been that guy at the party. And I'll continue to be that guy at the party, because art has meaning, and sometimes I want to share it. But I also respect Trent Reznor being interviewed. There's that series Song Exploder, which was a podcast that became a Netflix series, and they highlight the making of songs, which is fascinating. And he was all about, in the studio he did this and that. When it came to his lyrics, he's like, I don't talk about it. I don't talk about it. That's for me. You do what you want, and that could be open ended too. And I don't I think you and I are both in the same spot. We're not saying, again, one way is right and one way is wrong. It's just it's now this kind of machine, and the sports stock. I told you this could be an entire episode. The sports stock thing goes back to a lot of this really began in the early 2000s with a show called Pardon the Interruption. It's still going. Michael Wilbon, Tony Kornheiser. It's the best show. Mark Ellis and I will say it's the best show. It's one of the most influential shows of all time. People still forget what the show is about. It is two friends, but journalists, who worked in the same city, D.C., for a long time, know each other, and they exchange ideas on the show. Sometimes one of them has a pretty strong opinion. Sometimes they'll debate and argue, but they exchange ideas, and they do it in a wonderful, organized fashion. That got turned into more of a contest approach in other sports media, which I think flew into a lot of what the movie talks and all that kind of stuff did. And there's an influence there that is, I think, misinterpreted from the beginning era of that show. It's still one of the best shows, but it was exchange of ideas, not a war to see who was right. And that's sometimes where these interviews really get used as evidence that you've won your own war.
Right. And that makes a ton of sense. There's a huge difference between what do you think? What do you think? An exchange of ideas, maybe supported with evidence, versus make your predictions and we'll see who's right. Yeah. So anyway, just wanted to own that I accept that this is the business model and creators are just out there doing their job, and I am yelling at a cloud about it, but want to let it go because it's fun to discuss, and that's why we're discussing it. It's our whole episode pretty much because it's insightful, interesting, fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Any final thoughts before we dive in?
No, and we're about to dive into Leslie's thoughts because she was been asked several times, and she's doing her job. And yeah, I maybe I'm just getting pre-defensive for anyone who might misunderstand what we're saying. Like, no, it's fun. I love George Lucas's words about Star Wars. Mm-hmm. I love it. I like I said, I do it sometimes just over lunch. I love reading the words, but everything built up around it can be somewhat exhausting and problematic.
Yeah, this is the last thing I'll say, which I think I have said before. If I had a magic wand, I would have it just be a sort of cultural tradition of like, give an interview immediately about costume design or a funny thing that happened on the set or whatever. Mm. But I would have like a month moratorium. Just let a movie breathe for a month. Yeah. And that, so the audience has a time to form that bond, have a conversation. Yeah. And then, a screenwriter come out and go, actually, no. The meaning of this scene is this. Yeah. That would be my ideal world. But we don't live in my ideal world, and maybe we shouldn't. So we're going to have fun talking about these quotes. So there was a long interview on Collider, which was, if you read the actual interview, it's a real conversation from a journalist who clearly has great love and great insight for the Acolyte, and really engaging Lesyle Headland in a conversation. So Lesyle Headland's quotes aren't like, I have called a press conference and here's what I'm announcing. They're flowing out of specific questions. So there's a lot of discussion in this interview about shipping and about the Enemies to Lovers convention and storytelling, but I wanted to focus on the chimere of it all. Also want to acknowledge I'm really cherry picking. There's a ton in these interviews, and I cherry picked some things that I thought would be interesting for us to talk about. So Lesyle Headland had this to say about Chimere's sincerity when he's talking to Osha. Lesyle Headland says, so in my opinion, Osha is extremely in denial about her own anger at the Jedi and at her father, i.e. Sol. She's in extreme denial about that because she feels like she's not allowed to be angry, and she's in an enormous amount of pain over her sister and their history. And she also feels like she's not allowed to feel that. So someone coming in and saying, actually, feeling all those things is not only okay, but actually could restore your spiritual foundation is almost too much. I don't think that's manipulation. I think Chimere, is telling the truth. When he says semantics, I think he means it. He's just like, why wouldn't you use what is obviously the part of you that needs to be explored the most? Why wouldn't you lean into that? Why would you continue to suppress it for really no reason? The Jedi threw you away, so what are we still doing? What is this thing that you were thinking? You don't owe them anything. You owe yourself to start living your life and recognize your own strength in the Force. So a quote on something we discussed a lot about Chimere's conversations with Osha about tapping into the Force in a different way. So how does this quote affect your feelings about the dynamic between Osha and Chimere in the most recent episode, episode 6, Teach Cropped?
I think it emboldens what I've been thinking, that I'm afraid for Osha, and I have to own I want her to stay. I'll say on the good side, but it seems like Chimere would say, "Is that really the good side?" But yeah, it makes it even more tense for me, because I think he's speaking some truths here. But the question I have for him, and I think this applies to a lot of life now, is what are we really talking about?
Mm-hmm.
this great advice you're given, it adds tension to this relationship because you're hiding what you want the result for her to be and what the result is for you. That's where I start with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think we went to a very similar place. I
Yeah.
really appreciate these thoughts because I think it does reflect stuff that we've been talking about and that lots of people have been talking about. So
Mm-hmm.
not making it a scoreboard thing, but just feeling like um, one of the things I've been most interested about in the character of Osha is that it was so clearly established in the first episode that, when her life is in danger, that prison ship is crashing and she reaches out with the Force to try to call Pip to her, and she can't. And like,
Mm-hmm.
why not? What is she suppressing? Why is she not able to
Mm-hmm.
tap into the Force at this point in her journey? That has felt like there's this very interesting story of Osha is repressing some part of herself. So I think
Mm-hmm.
this story that that is happening about her denying a part of herself of anything that's related to anger makes
Mm-hmm.
sense to me because she
Mm-hmm.
came into the order angry and afraid of her own fear. There's all that dialogue between her and Soul about Soul trying to teach her how to let go of the trauma of the past, and her feeling like she failed him as a student, and him feeling like he failed her as a
Mm-hmm.
teacher. So everything has been pointing to Osha defines herself, her relationship to the Jedi, as I never mastered those darker emotions that came from my childhood trauma. I never mastered fear, anger, loss, and letting them go. And the fact that she would be hung up on about them and need somebody to say, "Hey, it's okay to look at those things,"
Mm-hmm.
makes a ton of sense. And I don't think for me, it's about the dark side. I feel like to me, the story of the Jedi is uh, the Jedi who are successful don't deny those
Right.
emotions. They don't deny pain, fear, loss, anger. They work hard to not act on them. And
Mm-hmm.
the scene I think about a lot is spoilers if you've never watched the Clone Wars animated series. The scene where Maul attempts to break Kenobi by murdering the love of his life, Satine. And Maul's kind of like, the hell, why didn't it work? And
Yeah.
it's not like Obi-Wan's like, I feel nothing.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
horrified and
Horrified.
heartbroken and guilty and angry and all those
Mm-hmm.
things at the same time. And he just kind
Mm-hmm.
of sadly tells Maul, like, this is the whole thing. This is what I've always been doing is those things are real. It's horrible. I'm in agony, but I'm not going to jump up and join the dark side because
Mm-hmm.
that's the weak choice. So to me, I don't think that Osha getting in touch with all of those feelings is at all like giving into the dark side. I think it's necessary and healthy and healing.
Mm-hmm.
My question is the exact same of yours. But why does Chimere want her to do that? What does he want to get out of it? Is he
Mm-hmm.
just like
Mm-hmm.
is he starting, an online
Yeah.
a phone app therapy of,
Not a sponsor.
Chim- Chimere's questions of like, "Oh, let me help you access your anger so you can feel whole and complete and process it and let it go." I
Mm-hmm.
don't think so. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll kick it back to you there. What do you feel? Do you feel it's healthy that she gets in touch with those emotions? And what do you think
Yes.
Chimere? Why do you think Chimere wants her to?
He wants her to because it's a perversion of the truth. Again, Leslie has said it. He's telling the truth. So, ding, scoreboard for her, I guess there. And it's part of what her artistic intention was. He is telling the truth. Count Dooku was telling the truth. That
Hmm.
that scene with Obi-Wan in Attack of Clones is so good because he's the first to kind of say, hey, let me lay it on you here, buddy. Here's what's going on. And the question there too is, what are we really talking about, Count Dooku? Like, what do you want to do with that truth? And I think it's easy to misinterpret the Jedi way as being disconnected from those emotions. I think maybe it's Anakin going, attachment is forbid, and we think that means you can't have any kind affinity or affection or attachment to someone. It's what you do with it. And all those danger emotions that Yoda warns about don't go away. They never go away. You know, I still get on a plane. I'm like, I used to have horrible anxiety on a plane. I don't anymore, but it's still there. I have to choose what to do with that. I have to choose, how many drinks I'm going to have, I guess is one way to deal with it. But you know what I mean? Like, and so everything Chimera is saying, but it's such a perversion of it. It's such a like, you have anger and they're telling you to get rid of your anger when your anger can fuel you. You bring up Maul and Kenobi. Where does that end up? It ends up with Maul refusing to change, move forward, or grow. So he dies in 2 seconds on Tatooine, trying to use the same tactics, methods, and moves that he used 20 plus years ago, 30 years ago, because he doesn't change and grow where Kenobi has. He's evolved. He's used those emotions and processed them, come to terms with them, where Maul's still living in that. And I think that's part of the lie that Chimere's selling behind the truth. Is anger can make you who you are, as opposed to you process your anger and move on from it in a healthier way. So that's, again, why I fear for Osha, because isolated, just taken out of context of your own life, these thoughts could send you down the wrong path.
Yeah. And I mean, so far in the show, Osha, to me, like that, she's got trauma. She's got things she's working through. She has that flash of anger when she takes the blade from Chimera and puts it to his throat. But I don't feel like she's anywhere. The way that was shot and acted, it felt to me like she just kind of a primal scream. Not like there was any sort of like, is she or isn't she? There wasn't any sort of energy to me of like, she's even remotely close to actually taking his head off. So I feel like, I'm so curious to see how it goes, but I feel like Osha might be on a great path, putting on that helmet of, she does need to acknowledge all of these emotions and process them. But if Chimera follows the Sith playbook, he does not want her to acknowledge the emotions, work through them, pass through them, and let them go. He wants her to stay in them forever. He wants her to be angry always and focus only on her anger. So what he's saying to her right now is, yeah, there are a lot of emotions that the Jedi don't want you to touch. And I think it's a legitimate criticism of the Jedi. I think some of the flawed Jedi aren't like Obi-Wan in that moment where Maul tries to break him, where they're just like, don't ever think about it. Nope. Don't think about anger. Don't think about fear. Don't feel them. I think that's a flawed Jedi. I think a good Jedi does wrestle with him. There's a whole Clone Wars arc of Yoda going, yeah, it's been too long since I've checked in on my dark side. And it's always there, and you always got to check in with it to make sure you're not being ruled by it. And that isn't what Chimera's saying. I really, in my opinion, maybe he'll surprise us, and maybe he'll be like, great, you did it. And can you help me work past my anger? And neither of us can be Darksiders, and we can just go on our way. Maybe that'd be great, but I think he is going to want her to go, isn't that great? Don't you feel that anger? Now never move on from it. Use it to power yourself.
Absolutely. Yep. Use it as fuel.
Yeah, fuel. So I can't wait to see how that all plays out. Ken, how would you, or how have you reacted on a personal level if someone like Chimera gave you truly good advice, but possibly for their own dubious, selfish reasons?
Happens all the time. I am, dancing around an internal issue at another spot where I'm just like, I hear what you're saying, but I think you're recruiting me versus venting. And I just want to, I'm not going to be there for someone who needs any kind of help or advice, but I'm hearing good things from you, but I don't trust your intentions right now. And I think we've all dealt with that. Or sometimes that advice of, yeah, that really works. That really works for me. You're making sense, but I see how you're using it, right? I see how you're using these hard truths, these questions that you've asked, and I don't trust your path. So I think we've all been in those life situations, none of them with lightsabers at our sides, that, can you separate the intentions from the truth or the advice?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I've had that, everything from, some parroting moments to when people give you notes on creative projects. There's a lot of times of like that one note in there is really, really good, and it was really true, and I hadn't seen it, and I should really look at that, work on that. But then like kind of the end of the note session is, and that's why you should scrap this story and start over. Like, Nope.
Mm-hmm.
One part of this is good and true, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean all of it is. And
Right.
not to get too personal, but like my mother gave me some great advice in life, and there was a point where it tipped into like, ooh, that's probably good advice, but there's an agenda of a specific choice that you want me to make
Mm-hmm.
that is animating all of this advice. So the advice might be good by itself, but what is the other person wanting out of the thing that they are giving you good advice about, which is so to me what I think is going on with Chimere.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Now, how does it benefit him? He's not doing this as a service. He wants an acolyte.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to
Yeah.
be alone. He said it very clearly. So if
Mm-hmm.
Osha does give in to the anger and stay there, what does he get out of it? And is it
Mm-hmm.
actually good for Osha?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Can't wait to see that how it all works out. We are now moving on to the great topic of surrendering blades. I misread that, so I thought it said surrendering babies. And like that's not what we're talking about this
No,
week.
of
Maybe
course not.
next week. So there's a fun quote about Osha's Jedi blade and what happens when someone walks away from the Order. Leslie Headland said, "Pablo Hidalgo and I talked about that a lot because obviously in Ahsoka we see that, but in live action we haven't totally seen the process of what that would look like." But one thing Pablo and I talked about was turning in your saber, that there would be a ceremony around relinquishing your saber, and that would happen of your own free will. It wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
taken from you. You would offer it up and would be a part of the ceremony of your leaving. So I just love the concept of Chimere tapping into, again, this part of Osha that is quote unquote missing and saying, how does it feel to hold one in your hand again? Because that's a tactile way of saying clearly you miss it.
Yeah.
So talking about that moment where Osha has picked up his blade and he's like, I bet it feels good to hold one again. Like, what happened to your blade? So how do you feel about this idea that there is a Jedi ceremony that when you leave, you offer up your blade? And do you think this is just great backstory that
Yeah.
Leslie and Pablo are talking about, or do you think the surrendering of the blade is a vital part of these final two episodes of this season?
I think it should be a vital part. I think it is. We talked about the meeting on the Acolyte report of Saul kind of putting his lightsaber in front of Osha to say, "Hey, here's a symbol of something you want." I like this idea. It's much more softer than McGarnagle, give me your badge and gun, and have I guess maybe if you're fired from the Jedi Order, that might be what the case is. But again, this speaks to me that it's more than this weapon. It is a symbol. It is a symbol of peace and justice in the galaxy, and it's such a part of you, especially now. I didn't grow up. We didn't. 80s. There wasn't much thought into. Well, you go gather your crystal. Your crystal kind of speaks to you in a way. It calls to you. Your lightsaber is an extension of you. It
Mm-hmm.
was a laser sword to me, and it was a great toy I had. That's kind of how I viewed it, and I like the evolution of that. So this is part of that evolution. That it would make some sort of sense. I'm going again. It's the day of cross-referencing Count Dooku. Like he's still been able to walk into the temple, which maybe now looking back we shouldn't have allowed him just to walk in the temple after he retired. But I kind of like all that, and I wouldn't mind seeing this ceremony at some point, and if it's here, and talking about the last two episodes at the time of this recording, like I think that blade's gonna the concept of the blade should mean a lot to Osha and her choices
Mm-hmm.
and her path.
Yeah, I really hope. I don't need to see this ceremony, but man, would I love her blade to pop up, and even if it doesn't literally, I think this idea is so important.
Yeah.
I love just the peek behind the scenes of like having these kind of like really fun conversations with the whole team of
Yeah.
people who build and
Hmm.
guard and evolve the lore of Star Wars. It's fun to get that peek behind it. And also, like, even if it's not in the Acolyte, I would just love to see this because I love the Jedi ceremonies. I love seeing their culture. I love to see them
Yeah.
knighting people. I'd love to see in live action more of a formal Jedi trial, like we've got to
Hmm.
read about in some of the publishing side. I like to see them making their blades. I like to see them having funerals. I want to see the official Jedi potlucks on Life Day.
Yeah.
Any official Jedi ceremony, I'm down with. And this one is really cool to me for all the reasons that you were saying. I think the lightsaber has only grown in symbolism
Hmm.
over the years. But this show has built on it with Soul offering it up to young Osha as a symbol.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the idea of a Jedi ceremony, specifically for Osha, but for any Jedi who leaves the Order, I think it's really powerful because it is giving up a part of yourself. It isn't just, in an 80s movie, throwing down your Smith & Wesson, and then 2 minutes later, you knock out a bad guy and you take his Smith & Wesson, and it's just a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a symbol in the way it's treated in some of that storytelling. But like you're saying, that's the Kyber crystal that called to you.
Yeah.
That is the hilt that you designed that might be similar to others, but according to the old Hu Yang, no two are exactly the same. He would recognize Osha's blade. Yeah. So I think this idea that it isn't just handing over your weapon, but it is truly handing over a part of yourself. To me, it reflects the philosophy that being a Jedi isn't a job. It's an identity. It's a choice of what to do with your entire life. And so it's not like, well, I'm not licensed to carry this anymore. It's not so real world. It's this weapon is a symbol that I have made the choice to devote my entire life in this. I think the whole not getting married it isn't just, it's not just about attachment. It's not just about celibacy or any physical act. It is about, I don't have anything to give a partner because being a Jedi is my entire life. It's my entire identity. And I think that idea of, if you're saying you don't want to be a Jedi, then you're that's a part of your identity. You're still yourself. You're still who you are, but you've made the choice that this isn't a part of your identity anymore, and you have to surrender that. I think that's it's a really cool way to reinforce the how huge the commitment of being a Jedi is.
Really agree with that. And yeah, it'd be fun to see. Again, growing up, the idea of going to some snowy ice planet to search for a crystal that's speaking to you, I would have been like, what are you talking about? They just use it to kill stormtroopers. What do you mean?
Yeah.
So I love when that kind of stuff can expand.
Yeah. Final thought on this. We just did our commentary for Rise of Skywalker, which is available on Patreon if you're a patron, or to buy as an individual thing. And one of the things that really popped to me is how much Luke talks about, and Leia and Rey talk about surrendering blades. Rey practices with the Skywalker blade, but then gives it back to Leia until she's earned it. Yeah. And Leia encourages her to take it on the mission. When Luke is recounting what happened in Leia's training, she decides that the Jedi path isn't for her, and she surrenders her blade to Luke. So to me, that's great. Like, taking some of those little details in Rise of Skywalker and tying it into the entire history of the Order as well.
Love that. Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back to talk about more details from the interviews that happened over the past week. Back in a moment. And we are back to continue our discussion of insights into the Acolyte and beyond from a recent round of interviews. We're going next away from some of the deep philosophy and the pondering of true motivations to just a straight up answer. Lesyle Headland was also asked about the mysterious unknown planet Chimere makes its home on, and she made one thing crystal clear. Here's the quote. It's not Ahcho-To.
There you go. End story.
She continues, I know it's similar, and it was intentionally supposed to be similar in terms of terrain and feeling isolated and surrounded by water and less lush green and more rocky. But the idea is that cortosis is mined on this planet, so I don't think that's the case with Ahcho-To. Part of the reason this is his home base is that cortosis is a very rare metal. I don't think we say it explicitly in the show, but that's a reason it's not Ahcho-To. You have, I think, memorized the name of the planet from EU Legends that looks like Ahcho-To, but has the cortosis veins running through it that everybody has been sort of on top of. It's probably this planet.
Yeah, you say that, and you set me up. And
I'm so sorry.
Baldemnik. I almost said I would have called it Baldemnik. Yeah.
I was just trying to figure out like what strange drug for hair loss does it sound like? Baldemnik.
Yes,
Baldemnik.
Yeah,
got it.
Tenebrous
So
death spot. Yeah.
the tenebrous death spot. Yes. She goes on to discuss a little bit more about Octo, but about all that. But anyway, I wanted to take a look at how do you feel about the similarity to Octo now that we know it is not Octo?
I love it, and this is an example of where I'm like, well, I'm glad there's an answer, so we can stop wasting time and energy on it in a fun way. I mean, in a fun way, people, of speculating. You and I were doing that. Everyone was doing that, and I like that she didn't say, "Oh, it's blank planet," so she's left it open. But I like that there was a little bit of, that was intentional. Isn't that cool? That was intentional, and we can kind of discuss it. So therefore, I really like where we're leading. I like the idea of it. I mean, I'm glad I didn't feel, I'm no longer feeling like I'm crazy, and all of us were crazy. Like, but wait a minute, right? Those are
really,
yeah, yeah. And that it would just kind of make some sense if you're putting together a story in this era, in this timeline of Star Wars, with some of these great movies and stories out there now to mine from, of saying, all right, that planet has a certain feeling, a vibe, and a theme behind it, and we're going to play with that as well. But it's a different version of it. Cool, ready to go, ready to figure out what it might be, or if that's even important. It might not be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks like Octo. You label it unknown planet. She did speak a little bit about that, of how it's unknown to some people. Chimere clearly knows it.
Yeah.
So there's a little something going on there. We talked about it a decent amount on our discussion about episode 6. I love that it is a swap in the dynamic, the visual dynamic and the emotional dynamic you would expect from the Jedi and the Sith, because Soul, well, in my opinion, his actions are very Jedi-like. He's processing his emotions. He's reaching out. He's trying to face the past. He wants to tell May the truth. He wants to own his own mistakes and all those things. But everything on Soul's ship is coded as a little bit more dark side. Communication is cut off. It is plunged into darkness. There's mistrust and deception about who is who, and all this stuff. Where in contrast, Chimere, the person we saw, in the scary Sith helmet, brutally murder people in a dark forest last episode, now lives in a natural, powerful, beautiful place that has a loving little family of Skura, I guess they're called, little elephant mice family. And I think it's one of my favorite things about that episode 6 of all of those twists, not just in the swap of relationships with Osha and May swapping masters, but they were dealing with the Jedi, and the Jedi's environment is coded more Sith-like, and we're dealing with a Sith or a Darksider, and his environment is coded more Jedi-like, which is only more reinforced by, we spent time with Luke there, and this is where Luke connected with Rey. This is where, Rey made a choice to make a difference, and it goes well, as other people have pointed out, with another thing we discussed is Chimere also pulling a Yoda and pretending to be a low-status person. And so it's a lot of Jedi similarities, but perhaps with a different mission.
Yeah, and going back to even what we talked about up top of like, what are we talking about here? This is you got a nice little resort here. What are you doing with it? What are you doing with it?
It looks nice. It looks cozy and loving, and I'm making stew and I'm healing you. But why? What do I want out of it? What does Chimere want out of it? Yeah. So knowing it's not Octo, to me, it just makes me think more about Chimere's line about, I was a Jedi, and she's like, I didn't know you. And he's like, it was a long time ago. And one of the interviews, she was also asked about, like, hey, that line seems kind of like it was underlined. Should we be paying attention to that? And she was like, yes, you should. So that was it was like, stop speculating about Octo, keep speculating about that.
Yeah, but even then, I don't know. It's like I don't know. It's like, you ever play that game where like your mom hides like a toy and it's hot or cold, like she's playing hot or cold with us. Cold, warm.
That's really what I want all interviews with creators now to just be a game of hot and cold, if possible on a literal stage, and you can kind of put over here Chimere's the Knight of Ren, and like, cold.
Warm, warm.
Warm or cold, but the dark side's cold. So which one means which?
Yeah, and you get so close to the toy that your mom bought and hid under the couch, and you're like, and she's like, hot, 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 and you're like, where? Is he a Sith or not? I don't know.
Is the present the couch? Did you give me the couch? Yeah. So I was tied up in the Ahcho of it all. Of like, well, if it is Ahcho, is it that the Sith knew about it all along, or does that mean Chimera is actually quite ancient? All that kind of stuff. But now that I know it is not Ahcho, I'm thinking a lot more about Chimera's line that I've been now encouraged to speculate about. That maybe he was in stasis of some kind. But
yeah,
I'm just kind of jamming this in here because I like speculating responsibly. What we mean by responsible speculation is, hey, it's fun to speculate. Don't get too attached to it and then be mad if it's not true. I'm having fun with some of my speculation, but I'm not going to be mad if that's not the way it turns out, which is what the whole responsible
over the years
thing is about.
Yeah, people have misunderstood, I think, what we mean by that we don't speculate or have predictions or theories. No, we do. We just
I love it. Go. It's fun. And sometimes I like to speculate wildly, and I don't expect it to come true. It's just fun to talk about because I want to have fun. And in that spirit, Ken, I'm going to run this by you as well.
Okay.
How would you feel? And again, this isn't a prediction, and I'm not going to be mad if it doesn't turn out this way. How would you feel if it turned out like Chimera is a Claudite, or like Zam Wesell, or some other kind of new shapeshifter, and the creators love the prequel era, and this show has so been focused on that theme of don't trust your eyes; they can deceive you. What if that's being done to the audience? What if we're calling him Darth Arms? That intimacy and that vulnerability he built with Osha was being literally nude. That scar maybe could be not real. How would you feel if if so much of the relationship that we've built to this character is untrue, and he's a 500-year-old Trandoshan?
I actually, it's wild in a fun way, and it's sometimes I like to just deal with what's there, and I don't like when I get tricked. But it would be valuable, and it would speak to a lot of things that we've been questioning him on about. Well, that's true, but what are you getting at? Oh, you do look great. Oh, you got some Sith nudity going on. Good job, you. Who are you really? I like that idea. We talked when you talked before. I mentioned, of course, Melisandre having the necklace. And, she's a 400-year-old crow. Like I think there'd be something to play with about. With 2 episodes left, they got a lot to pack in, and I think there's a lot of that's part of the stress of these theories is what can they do, and what are they planning to do. So that one would make sense fast, if that makes sense. Like got it visually. I get what this liar's been lying about.
Yeah.
While telling the truth.
Yeah. Again, saying this for fun, and if you disagree, oh boy, do I understand. That's just fine. And I'm not putting any money on this on Vegas or saying anybody else should think this or agree with it. Just trying to have a little bit of fun.
It's not a scoreboard.
It's not a scoreboard, and I'm not going to be mad when it doesn't turn out that Chimera is not Zam Wesell's long lost, grandfather or whatever.
Yep.
All right.
Remember, I worked for a channel. That's why I didn't read this entire article. I don't read this channel's articles anymore. But this was literally turned into a segment called like Prediction Scoreboard.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I don't like it. Didn't like it then. Don't like it now.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on a bit to something I think that really relates to what you're talking about of like, there's so many fun things to think about, and there's so many questions, and so many of them Lesyle Headland responded in these various interviews of like, there's a reason for that. Wait, we got only 2 episodes. So there was a discussion in an interview with the outlet Inverse, and this one actually came after the broadcast of episode 5 and on the day of release for episode 6. And there was a quote about Kylo Ren's theme where Lesyle Headland said, "It is there on purpose, but I can't tell you why, and I can't go into what it is, but you shall see." So just first, I want to ask, why do you think it's there? Do you have responsible speculation or not? Where are you at?
It was fun to take that Knight of Ren path. I'm definitely not on that as much as I was after this episode. And again, I like, none of us were crazy. We heard the music we heard. It was there. I think it represents, I know a lot of people are going into the shipping realm might be because of some of the stuff going on with Kylo and Rey and everything, and that's possible. I see it as, who is Kylo Ren? He's a character that made a choice and maybe went too far and wants to turn back, but can't. And then he's dealing with that, wrestling with that, and hiding that. It could be related to that. Could be related to someone of legacy, someone of lineage that's of import in Star Wars, and crumbled under that. But that's where I kind of go with Kylo, who he is, who he was.
Yeah, I'm feeling, since it would appear that that planet is not Ahcho, but the similarity to Ahcho was a choice to lean into that. That if the Ahcho similarity with unknown planet, that's probably Baldemic, if that's primarily thematic, I would not be shocked at all if Kylo's theme is there for largely thematic reasons, to tie together the journey of these two characters. And like you're saying, is he a Sith who questions? Are they tied together by the similar traumas of feeling rejected and alone, and needing companionship in a way that Vader might have been lonely, but Vader wasn't out there trying to make buddies. In the same way that Kylo seems wounded and Chimera seems wounded and needing that connection. And in another interview, Leslie Headland does talk about being really moved and affected by the great Last Jedi moment of Kylo saying that small, desperate pleas that he says to Rey to take his hand in The Last Jedi. So there's obviously thematic, emotional connections to them. And I'm thinking at this point, that's probably what it is.
I think you're absolutely right to point out the loneliness of the dark side, loneliness of Sith, and whatever title you want to put on it, and that works for me as well. Chimera seems a little lonely too.
Yeah, and all of the back and forth with, is he a Sith, or hey, Kylo's theme, his helmet, is he a Knight of Ren? And then there are people I've seen having discussions about but they keep saying Sith in interviews, and we were told this is a story from a Sith perspective. I don't want him to be a Knight of Ren. I wanted the Sith perspective, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I think from what we've got so far, it is likely that Chimera is a rejected Sith, that maybe he was in the lineage, the official, rule of two, and he was kicked out. So that, yes, he was a Sith. And maybe if Kylo Ren's theme is meaningful in terms of plot, maybe he will go on to found the Knights of Ren, or maybe after he got booted out of the Rule of Two, maybe he joined the Knights of Ren. I think all that stuff is a possibility, but it feels like you were saying, like a lot of plot to unroll right now. And there are only 2 episodes left, and I don't mind some mystery, but if the kind of Pandora's box of this is also an origin story for the Knight of Ren is opened up, I feel like it will at best be teased for a theoretical season 2.
Yeah, it's going back to the heart of our theory and speculation conversations over the years, is we always ask of ourselves and anyone. If you stop me at a bar, you see my Star Wars hat, and you stop me at a bar and you give me a theory, I'm going to want to know why. Why? Knight of Ren origin story, awesome, but what is the why of it? And sometimes that's when the theories start to crumble for me, or just become fun, but I don't think we have room. Fun maybe in season 2, and maybe it's leading somewhere. But this show doesn't have a guaranteed season 2, so I think it's all contained in the thematic answers, usually more closer to the truth, I think.
So I think it's probably going to be thematic. I absolutely do not think this is going to happen. This is not a prediction. It is, again, fun. If this story was a comic book, I would imagine that I'm flipping to the final page, and this is in the story of the Acolyte, the story of Chimera is a story being told to Ben Solo. And that is Kylo / Ben's connection to this, because a lot of it feels like it's the kind of story that maybe Snoke via Palpatine, maybe Ren, the Knight of Ren, would want to tell Ben Solo. to break him, because look at how nasty and flawed the Jedi have been. Look at how they've been failing their young ones like you forever. Look at how sensitive and wounded and misunderstood Darksiders are. They just want to be free, and nobody will let them. I know you don't like your name, Ben. Don't you want to choose a cool new name? Like, there's a lot in the Acolyte that really aligns well with the great storytelling that Charles Soule did in the Rise of Kylo Ren comic book that gets into a little bit more nuances of Ben Solo's seduction to the dark side and what appeared attractive and truthful to him at the time. So yeah, like I do not think this show's gonna end and they'll have gotten Adam Driver back for one scene, and it turns out the whole thing is a story. But I went down this whole road because I'm like, okay, besides just Chimera and Kylo are similar, how could this possibly connect to him? And it was just a really intriguing thought to me of what kind of story would you want to tell a young Ben Solo to further break him. And so far, this story has a lot of those elements.
Look, and you're talking about some great whys, but also it doesn't need to be Adam Driver. It just needs to be a younger kid, and then you bring Ian McDiarmid back, and we have a Peter Falk, Fred Savage ending from Princess Bride. As you wish. I think that's how it goes. I think it's a bedtime story.
As you wish. This is not a prediction. It is not going to happen, but I thought it was interesting. Any other thoughts on the Kylo theme?
It's fascinating. I'm more of a hey, let's see what happens. Let's watch it, which is kind of what I think some of the answers Leslie's given in this particular interview. Of yep, it's there. Keep watching. Cold, warm, hot,
near, far, yeah. So enjoyed talking about all of those interview stuff. I think the Acolyte has been, I think, much like a Rich Cortos's mine on Baldemic. It's been a rich for discussion, exploration, hearing lots of different people's perspectives, and I'm glad that we have another week of able to digest and discuss and theorize and hear lots of people's different approaches and experiences. So moving on from that, we're going to grab our Patreon question. This comes to us from Addie Clark. Addie says, "Hi there, ForceCenter. Back with another question. Star Wars and Padme related, of course. How big of a scandal do you think Anakin and Padme actually would have been if people had found out? I have to admit that I'm in my mid-30s, and it only just recently hit me that when Padme says in Revenge of the Sith the Queen probably won't allow her to continue to serve as senator if they find out she's pregnant, that it actually would have been a scandal, not just that the Queen of Naboo hates working mothers."
Yes.
Eddie continues, "So let's play our favorite what-if game. What if Palpatine's plan hadn't worked out and the Jedi Council and the Queen of Naboo and the Galactic Senate had found out about Anakin and Padme? Would it have been a big scandal? What do you think the ramifications would have been besides, and they all live happily ever after? I can understand the scandal for Anakin and the Jedi Order. I guess I'm less convinced that it would have been a scandal for Padme, unless we want to think about our own sad world in the double standards of women, in which case it would have been a very big scandal for Padme by virtue of her sex. Are we talking Scarlet Letter type deal? Is it the only story we hear about on Galactic CNN for weeks while the couple is forced to quietly retreat to the Lake Country and be hounded by the space paparazzi every time they go to Whole Foods?" Interested to hear your thoughts. I'm not really sure myself, but I've been thinking about it ever since I realized it wasn't just the Queen. Thought a woman's place was in the home with her kids. Facepalm, says Addie. Addie, I don't think you have any reason to facepalm. I think this is a question that lots of people have had. It is kind of one line of dialogue in Revenge of the Sith. The general impression in Attack the Clones that the relationship isn't just impossible because Anakin's training to be a Jedi. It's also impossible because Padme is a senator. So, there isn't a ton in the actual text of the prequel films. So I think a lot of people wonder about this, wrestle with this. So, Ken, where do you start?
I agree with Addie. It's potentially a one-sided issue in their galaxy, as it would be with ours, where Anakin might be praised and Padme torn asunder and tossed out. I think that's unfortunately very real. I don't necessarily think that's what the Queen meant, as Addie kind of comes to the realization as well. I think it's scandal in the sense of you're compromised, and I wish this would be in the real world of like, wait, what did your wife do? In what case are you overseeing? That seems like a problem. Like I take it in that way. Not that the senators or anyone from Naboo in politics needs to only concentrate on this, that you can't live your life. But there's a little bit of that's always been the stake with Padme, and later on with Leia, right? Of just like you're in this lane, and then therefore you cut off your entire being, and you need to be your entire person if you're going to help lead. And I think that's part of the tragic decision that Padme made, is to allow herself to be loved. But I think there's a little bit of church and state, so to speak, in the Jedi, I think I'll say this: I think it would have been a scandal within the Jedi Order, but who knows? It might have started a Coruscant movement for freedom of love inside the Jedi Order. Maybe people would have been on the sides of, hey, this isn't as wrong as we think. But that's for the Anakin side. Yeah, I do think there's just you're compromised, especially in a war, especially if the government doesn't completely trust the Jedi, and the Jedi the other way around. I think they might be upset too. Of Anakin, what are you saying to Padme? What are you telling her? We like to keep some things secret, right? We don't like to mix too much, even though we're pretty much generals in the Republic's army. I think it would have been that, but I'm with you. I'm going to trust the Queen a little bit, that she had the bigger picture in mind and not specifically related to working mothers.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah. Talking about the Anakin of it all quickly, it's a pretty direct violation of the Jedi Code, and he's been lying about it. And Obi-Wan kind of knows, and he's kind of tried to talk to him about it. There's some great stuff early in that Brotherhood book about I really should talk to him about this right now, but it keeps not being the right time, all that stuff. But it's amusing me, since we've all been so focused on Ki-Adi-Mundi. Imagine if Padme had talked Anakin into, let's just be honest, we made this choice, we can't serve anymore. Let's be honest. And Anakin went to the Jedi Council, and it's so fun to think of Ki-Adi-Mundi being like, no, it's not in your nature. I'm like, I swear to you, it is, dude, because she's pregnant.
No, you're a Jedi. We don't love.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a little side conversation about hearing Ki-Adi-Mundi. That about Anakin. Anyway, I think based on Padme's line specifically in Revenge of the Sith, for me, I've always kind of taken it as a canon answer is that, Naboo society seems to take, an oath of service very seriously. So maybe they have this is what we ask of you while you serve. And I think they also take honesty very seriously. And I feel like it's much more about not that she's pregnant or that she got married, but that it's a secret, that it is not honest, that she hid something from not the Jedi, but from her planet, her government, that in theory could potentially impact her decisions, that is going to maybe have some splash damage for Naboo itself and for Naboo's standing in the galaxy, in the Senate, in achieving the goals that they need. I have no idea. Like, maybe Naboo had a societal rule of like, hey, if you want to get married, of course, but we ask that you don't do it while you're serving, or, if you want to have, maybe they have that.
Yeah.
But it could also be that the problem is entirely just, I lied about it, and it's a complicated marriage. Yeah. And it could be that she's just like, hey, you know what? I'm so sorry. I fell in love with Rick Ollier, and, we got married. I'm with child. I need to go on maternity leave. And they'd be like, that's what Jar Jar's for. He's the junior senator. No problem. Like, maternity leave might be no problem at all. I think the problem is the hidden nature of the marriage and the complex nature of the marriage.
I love what you're saying about Rick Ollier going, our whole love is a problem. And great. Now we're getting into Naboo HR. Most disclosure relationships. I've been in that situation. So it's not so much the act as it is the lie, possibly in this case.
Yeah. So that's the Naboo part of it for me. The larger galactic thing. Yeah, I think this is to Eddie's funny but sad joke. This would be the only story we hear about on Galactic CNN for 4 weeks, for sure. I think the difficult part of the scandal is twofold. I think one is just it's a lie, or a hidden truth, that Padme I think values her own honesty, and I don't think Padme regrets getting married. I don't think Padme regrets opening up her life to not just be about service, but to being a full and complete human being. It's, again, to me, it's the secret. And I think the fact that she kept the secret is something that Padme would wrestle with. And I think, does it do damage to things that she's trying to accomplish with Bail and Mon Mothma and Ryo Chuchi? And would they be disappointed in her? There's that whole honesty part of it.
Yeah.
That I think is maybe what Padme would wrestle with. And then in terms of the people who would try to take advantage of the political scandal, to me, here's the scandal. Padme is a senator who is making decisions about where to send Jedi during the war, and she's married to one. She's married to one of the most famous. It's a conflict of interest. There's also, which can be totally abused by her critics, she led the effort to oppose the Military Creation Act. She has done everything possible to stay out of or de-escalate the war. She tried to politically pump the brakes on buying more clones in the clone animated series. She fought for those peace talks with Mina Bonteri, also in the Clone Wars animated series. So her political enemies would smear her endlessly on Space CNN of see, she just didn't want the war because she wanted her Jedi husband at home to canoodle with. It would be bad faith. She never meant this. This is why you can't trust anybody who is weak on defending the Republic. This is why you can't trust Bail. This is why you can't trust Mon Mothma, because they all have all these people who want to pump the brakes and restart talks with those evil separatists. They all have their hidden agendas. How many Jedi is Mon Mothma in a secret relationship with?
Yeah,
I think that's the scandal. And the banking clan, the Trade Federation, Orn Frita, Masa Mita, every political enemy that Padme has would run the story into the ground.
Now, do you feel that Palpatine, he might be on that side publicly. He is, Padme is his great rival, but that I could also see him going to Anakin and being like, everyone wants to get between you and your love, Anakin. This is why you need me. I'll put out these political fires, just like I'll take care of the Jedi. You need me, Anakin.
And I think he'd do the same manipulation to Padme of you've served so long, so well. Retire. Get the bleep out of my hair. Just go to Naboo and be peaceful. And even if she, Anakin would have had the horrible dreams, even if they walked away. Yeah. And I think for me, at kind of these are all fun things to discuss. But to me, at the end of the day, what sort of I think Padme is written to be the moral compass, to be the true north of the prequel era in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of times her ideas are we shouldn't start a military act. We should continue to have a conversation. The attempt between her and Minnie Bonteri to, actually have a conversation about what are the real problems and what can we negotiate gets blown up by the Sith. The Sith don't want that. They want conflict. And Padme is one who is always kind of advocating for, this is a complex situation, but what would have been the right way to handle it?
Yeah.
And I kind of feel in Revenge of the Sith, she tries to say to Anakin, we could just tell the truth and we could walk away from the Senate. We could walk away from the Jedi Order. We fell in love. We've got children, or a child at that point in her mind. We should walk away from this and be there for them. And in much like we're seeing in Acolyte right now with Soul being I shouldn't have hid this. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to get it out. I feel like Padme is in that place of I wanted this relationship. I want to be a fulfilled person. I shouldn't have hidden it from people. So I'll fess up. I'll tell the truth, and I'll focus on what matters right now, which is my family. And to me, that feels like a little bit of a true north. And I also want to add, in terms of comparing this to real world stuff and women's roles and politics and motherhood, those are complicated issues. And I'm not making any statement or speaking for anyone. I'm analyzing Star Wars and very open to people's lived experience in the real world, having the strong opinions about the real world. I'm talking about Padme in the space movie.
Yeah. One of those times where we're analyzing what's on screen. Yeah. It obviously it spills out into real things, but yeah, I get where you're coming from there too. Yeah. I could, the true Padme being the true North, and that response on the balcony, I think, makes less sense for me.
Yeah. How do you think Palpatine would have responded if they did just pack up and leave? They told everybody the truth and they packed up and they left Coruscant.
See, I think it would have been a loss for Palpatine on some levels of your wait, hold on, you're leaving it behind. I told you, you should definitely be in love. You should definitely keep going with this. But now you're trying to remove yourself from the board. No, I need this to break up. How do I ruin this relationship from afar? What agents or spies or what can I do on Naboo in the Lake Country to break this up and take it from you and feel as though it's been taken, that it's an actual loss that you're feeling, Anakin? I think that's his play. He would not have enjoyed, as much as he might have enjoyed, hey, Padme's off the board. I think it would have been not part of his plan.
He would have enjoyed that politically Padme is off the board, but he would still need Anakin to fear losing her. And I think he would have found a way.
Yeah.
Well, and on that bright note, any other thoughts about the complex topic of the Padme Anakin marriage scandal?
It's complex, but I also love talking Padme, one of my favorite characters in Star Wars, who represents a lot of great conversations, thoughts, and ideas.
Absolutely. All that great stuff with her in the Clone Wars animated series, the fact that she is quite consistently right and told she is wrong throughout the prequel films. She's a powerful, interesting character, and I love that we get to spend more time with her and celebrate her more, and hopefully more in the future. All right. With that, Ken, you want to let people know where they can find us?
Absolutely. We're ForceCenter. We can be found on social media at ForceCenter Pod. Facebook page is ForceCenter Podcast. Subscribe here on YouTube if you want. Don't forget the live stream this Friday. You can also hear us as a podcast wherever you find your podcast. Just search and find us. Merch available at tpublic.com/user/ForceCenter. Highlighting patreon.com/ForceCenter is a place to support us. Joseph mentioned it earlier. We do have our Rise of Skywalker watch-along commentary video up there. You can get that if you're a member of our Patreon page. But if you just want to swing through, it's in the shop, available for anyone outside of the Patreon support silo there. You can follow me at Ken Napzok. Go to kennapzok.com for more. Get ticket information, upcoming shows. San Francisco, Little Rock, Arkansas, but also Joseph Scrimshaw's big birthday variety show on August 16th. So excited to be part of that, and tell them more about it, where they can find the information.
Yeah, you can go to my website, josephscrimshaw.com, for the quickest, easiest link to this show. It's called Horror Years Old. I am turning an age this year, and I'm trying to embrace it with a fun comedy variety show. You can come see the show live here in Los Angeles at the great little comedy variety cabaret space, Lyric Hyperion. Or for so many of our wonderful ForceCenter friends, you can also live stream it from anywhere you got internet and watch the show live Friday, August 16th, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. You can also check out my website for updates on short films and all that kind of stuff, and follow me on all the various different social medias at Joseph Scrimshaw, just about everywhere. That is it. The news has broken.